Let me read to you a passage from the 7th chapter of St. Mark's Gospel, verses 31 to 37. It's the Gospel for Friday of the 5th week of Ordinary Time. St. Mark writes, "Then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon down to the Sea of Galilee and into the region of the Decapolis. There some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk, and they begged him to place his hand on the man. After he took him aside, away from the crowd, Jesus put his fingers into the man's ears. Then he spat and touched the man's tongue. He looked up to heaven and with a deep sigh said to him, 'Ephphatha,' which means, 'Be opened.' At this, the man's ears were opened, his tongue was loosened, and he began to speak plainly. Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone, but the more he did so, the more they kept talking about it. People were overwhelmed with amazement. 'He has done everything well,' they said. 'He even makes the deaf hear and the dumb speak.'" That's from Mark chapter 7, verses 31 to 37. It suggests thoughts on Christ as our model. What do I mean? Well, in Mark's account of the public ministry, the sequence is more or less as follows. After John the Baptist's arrest, Jesus returns to Galilee and begins his work in earnest. He calls his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. He teaches, he exorcises demons, and heals many in Capernaum, proceeding on throughout Galilee. He returns to Capernaum, teaching, healing, even forgiving sins, calling disciples, and disputing with scribes and Pharisees. Great multitudes are following him, and he teaches them, with his enemies now in tow, sowing criticism. We notice that he is beginning to teach the crowds by parables only, the explanation being left to his disciples. We also read that he gets away from it all with his disciples sailing across to the country of the Gerasenes on the eastern side of the lake. It is at the threshold of the Decapolis region. In Mark's sequence, this is our Lord's first visit during his public ministry to an area beyond the chosen people. Seeking a retreat with his closest disciples in the nearby pagan or semi-pagan territory, he is immediately confronted with the man possessed by legion. Christ sovereignly drives the demons out, permitting them to enter the herd of pigs that is close by. This good deed leads to his being asked to leave by the benighted multitude. Mark chapter 5, verse 17. So he leaves the Decapolis, but with the ex-demoniac as a now active disciple in the region. Chapter 5, verse 20. His rest with his disciples is cut short, and his ministry once again resumes in Galilee. There is the usual pattern of healings, exorcisms, powerful teaching, and he's now sending the 12 ahead of him with a share in his own powers. People pursue him for his miracles, while the hostility and criticism of the scribes and Pharisees continues to mount. This is the general pattern of his work in Galilee to this point. We notice, as has been mentioned, Christ's periodic visits to pagan territory. There was the brief excursion to the country of the Gerasenes to the east. There was also the visit to the region of Tyre and Sidon to the northwest, where he was prevailed upon by the Syrophoenician woman to exorcise her daughter from a demon. Perhaps the word was now out in that pagan area, and once again he left, this time passing through the region of the Decapolis. And this is our scene in the Gospel I read earlier. Mark writes that from Tyre he went through Sidon to the Sea of Galilee. through, perhaps, the region of the Decapolis. It was quite a circuitous route, perhaps taking his time in order to instruct the 12. He was heading for the lake to get across to Galilee, but seems to have been doing so via the Decapolis region. We're not told exactly where in the region of the Decapolis our Lord paused, but there in that pagan area he was presented not with a demoniac, one possessed by a demon, but with a seriously hearing and speech impaired man. Incidentally, this detail, among many like it, shows that the Gospels do not attribute all illnesses to the demons, though some are attributed to them. When our Lord healed the woman who was bent double, he said that Satan had held her bound all those years. There is no mention of Satan causing this man's physical afflictions. But what arrests our attention in this particular case is the unusual way in which Christ chooses to exercise his divine power. All that the man's friends and other onlookers wanted was for him to lay his hand upon him. That would be enough, as far as they were concerned. But no. Our Lord, taking him aside from the multitude privately, he put his fingers into his ears and looked up to heaven. He sighed and said to him, Ephphatha, that is, be opened. And his ears were opened and his tongue was released. Mark chapter 7, verse 33 to 35. Why did our Lord go through all this seeming rigmarole? We're not told, and so we do not know. We can only speculate, and we ought not take seriously our own speculations. Being Mark's account, Peter, his likely source, may well have been present as witness to the event. Some have suggested it may have been part of Christ's gradual instruction about features of their future sacramental ministry to members of the 12. I suspect it was also his response to the very particular circumstance he was in. He did not want acclaim, least of all in this pagan territory, nor did he want reports of magic spreading among non-Jewish folk. So he took the man aside from the multitude privately, and when it was all over, he commanded them to tell no one. Still, during the process itself, perhaps Christ did wish to give a truly personal touch to the deaf-mute man. So he gave to his action a gradual character that would have sunk into the heart of the man and left an unforgettable memory. In all things, the all-holy Christ was the good shepherd. The response of the people is one that can give us a perspective in all our contemplation of the person of Jesus Christ. We read that people were overwhelmed with amazement. He has done everything well, they said. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. He did all things well. They would not have realized the depth of truth that was in their spontaneous remark. When Caiaphas said that it was better for one man to die for the nation than for the nation to perish, he did not realize the depth of truth his words expressed. So too in our passage today. Christ's deeds were absolutely admirable and perfect. He is the model for mankind, the greatest man who ever lived, the truly perfect man, the man without defect, our brother and our God. Let him be the object of our constant contemplation and inspiration, our model forever.